Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of How to Draw Cars. We've got a sketch here sent in by Sadra. I don't know where he or she is located or how old they are. In this video, we're going to go over the things that they did right and the things that we can improve. So let's get started. So let's talk about what's working. First of all, this is one of the most original designs we've ever had on the channel. It's unique, it's open, it's airy, it's modern, and it's dynamic. He's doing this thing where he's got a repetition of shapes, these sort of triangular shapes and these hexagon shapes, and I think that works really well. Another thing that he's doing that's really positive is he's showing the interior. The upper of the vehicle is very open and glassy, and it has a very translucent and transparent quality. Another thing that he's doing that's working is he's using tone to tell the stories of his design. So he's trying to create this reflection on the side glass. He's using a tinted tone for the upper and the windshield. He's got this graphic behind the rear fender, and he's even using shading to tell the story that the car is sitting on the ground, that a car is on the ground plane. So all these things are really working for the design. So now let's talk about what we can improve. If you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you know I'm always talking about wheelbase. And one of the problems with the car and this sketch is that there's about 1.5 wheels between the wheels. And a good design sketch will have around 3 wheels between the wheels. So this wheelbase needs to be twice as long. The second thing is the front overhang. If you look at it, it's about 1/3 of the length of the car. And again, it tends to date the car, and that mass hanging out over the front wheels is just too large. The next thing we're going to talk about is center line of the rims. If you look, and I don't really understand what he's trying to do here, but this is probably the biggest problem with the sketch, other than the wheelbase being too short, is the center point or the hub of the rim just seems to be completely throwing off the rest of the perspective. And that is something that definitely needs to be fixed. And lastly, we have the surface development. We have some sections here where you can actually see what's going on with the surface, and then there are other areas that are really lacking any real information about what's happening on the surface. Now I have another video on the channel that speaks to what you're drawing when you draw these lines. So if you're interested in surface development and how to better understand what you're drawing, I would definitely go and check that video out as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in my ground plane, and then my front wheel, my front ellipse. I'm using a very thin pencil, so this is a much harder lead, and that's why the line work is so light, because this is basically my structure, my underlay. And I'm putting in 3 wheels between the wheels. And if you're wondering about how to build this structure in a more complete way, I have another video on the channel that goes over the whole process. And if you're interested, I would highly suggest that you watch that video as well. So I'm putting in my rims, I'm putting in the center line, the hub of the rim, which was a little bit off on the original sketch. So that is something that I wanted to make sure we got right on the redraw. Now I'm putting in the rims or the wheels at the far side, on the passenger side of the vehicle. And where you lay these down in space will dictate how wide your car is. So that's something that's very important to keep in mind as you're planning out the proportions of your vehicle. So here is that critical front end overhang, the front overhang, and how it's much shorter on my sketch now than on the original sketch. Again, this is going to make the car look even more modern, more contemporary, more futuristic. So putting in the upper, coming in with my belt line, and then into the front fender. And then defining that far edge, the far A-pillar, the roof line, and into the rear fender. And again, all this is set up upon where I put those wheels on the far side of the vehicle. So all that structure is there, and that gives me a very believable sketch. So now that my underlay is done, I can come back in with my Prismacolor Premier pencil, which has a much softer lead, and I can really start to define the form of this vehicle. And I'm doing that by drawing from my shoulder and creating these big sweeping gestures. I'm not concerned about the lines and how they meet and trying to make everything perfect. Again, this is art. I want to get the energy and the passion that I feel for my work onto the page. And so my line quality and how I'm handling the pencil and drawing from my shoulder is really what this stage and this part of the drawing is all about. Now, I did have someone leave a comment in one of the videos about how he's using math and geometry, and it was excruciatingly painful to use this mathematical based system to lay out a perspective drawing. And my reply to him was that this is poetry. This is not math. If you want to do math, become an accountant. Do statistics. Do something that's math oriented. This is poetry. This is art. You're trying to tell a three-dimensional story in a two-dimensional plane. And to do that, you have to be a magician. You have to be a poet. You have to develop these skills in order to represent your ideas in this two-dimensional plane. So I just wanted to acknowledge his comment, which I thought was very interesting. And if you're spending time trying to make math out of this, you're doing something wrong. Just do it until you can get it right. That's why it's called mileage. You got to do a lot of it in order to get good at this. And if nobody's ever said this to you before, I'll let you in on a little secret. Anything in life worth doing is hard. And if it wasn't hard, everybody would do it. There's a reason why becoming a car designer is so difficult, because this is a hard thing to do. And when you have to do something hard, you have to practice it a lot to get good at it. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so back to the drawing. I'm putting in the tones. One thing that I said I liked about the original sketch was his use of tone and the glazed areas and some of the graphics on the vehicle. So I'm making sure that I carry that over from the original sketch, which is really important to keep that going. I'm putting in my side glass reflection. I've got my B pillar there and working on my belt line. So another thing that I liked about the original sketch was the interior details. So I'm going to come back now again and put those details in just to give the hint that there's something under the glazing. If you're interested in these concepts about surface development and reflection patterns, and you want to take your work to the next level in a more structured way than, say, what's here on YouTube, check out my courses on Udemy. The links are in the description below. And if you'd like to have one of your designs featured on the channel on the Improve My Car Sketch series, send a clear, well-lit image to the address on the screen right now. So here's the sketch, and this is some of the things that we wanted to improve. We've got a small wheelbase, we've got how the wheels are related to the body, and we've got this long front overhang. So those are the three main areas that we wanted to improve. But there are some things that we wanted to keep, like the interesting shapes and the ability to see through the glass and to see the interior, and the overall sort of sleekness, uniqueness, and originality of the theme. So there are the things that we did want to fix. One being the wheelbase, that now we've got 3 wheels between the wheels. So the car looks much more planted, it looks much less toy-like, and that makes the overall appearance of the sketch appear much more professional. The second thing we wanted to fix was the front overhang. Now we've got a front overhang that's not hanging out in space, this huge mass, this huge volume, and the tire to nose ratio is much more compact. So this matches what's going on in the back, and again, it looks much more contemporary, it looks much more futuristic. The next thing that we fixed was the angles that the center hubs were on the original sketch. They were a little bit wonky and kind of going off in other directions, and so now we've got the center hubs and the wheels, the axis, the major axis of the wheels, following the perspective of the rest of the car. And this again is key. I see this all the time with young designers where they don't put the time and energy into getting the wheels right, and it really undermines the quality of their sketching. So as you're sitting down to do your own sketches, be sure to get the wheels and the perspective of the ellipses and all the details of the ellipses correct. It'll go a long way to improving your design sketches. The last thing is the surface development, where the goal was to better describe the volumes and the forms of the vehicle. In the original sketch, there were areas that were a little bit blank, and now we've got these forms delineated in a much more solid, much more realistic way. And I think that even, through the roof here with the reflection on the glass, like we have on the side glass, it goes a long way to telling the story of the vehicle. So what do you guys think? Are these videos helpful? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see in the future. As always, thanks for watching.